Hello, you beautiful people, and welcome to You, Me, and the UKTC, the show in which we deep dive the maps of the UKTC so that you don't have to. Now, recently there was a big change in so much as it was decided that they would take the heavy boards from the teams event and use them for all boards in singles. So that has created a bit of a different direction now. So, what I'm going to do is dive in and let you know my thoughts on what you now need to be aware of. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the different maps and we're just going to offer you my thoughts. So let's get going with mission number one, of course, which is sweeping engagement and terraform. So if we have a look at what the new addition is, if you haven't seen it already, it is this little square here. Okay. So what impact does this have? Well, previously, obviously, there was quite a tasty shooting angle down here into this spot, which for most of us is our natural expansion. So when we're playing a mission, we're trying to lock down a particular objective, our home field, and another, which is what we call our natural expansion. And this was our natural expansion just because that's where everything flowed. However, it did mean that someone could just pop out here, shoot into this area probably. Rapid ingress was really, or just deep striking down was really powerful to shoot in over there. It was quite a hard one to stop. So what this has done is therefore obviously made this a lot safer for you because now you can sit in this little area here and basically not be shot by anyone. Okay, if you think your opponent needs to come across all the way to here to be able to see into this kind of area now, that puts you at a much better place when you're trying to defend. So let's just have a look. These are just normal strike marines, and we're going to roughly find out how many OC or how many models we can fit without having to touch any of the terrain. Obviously, I'm not doing this absolutely perfectly. There's probably a little bit of movement range, but as you can see, you can definitely fit 5 normal dudes there. And be reasonably safe from your shooting. Okay, and if I was to nudge those forward properly, you'd be hidden from down that line. So that's pretty good. What it does mean is you're far more likely to be able to hold your own. And conversely, it means it's a lot harder to knock your opponent off. Because if I was to move over here, now how am I going to attack this area of my opponent's board? Well, quite often I would like to send, as a Grey Knight player, some like interceptors over there and shoot in and then move back and that sort of thing. Well, that is no longer an option. If I'm going to attack this space, I need to be able to charge in. Okay, and if they're an inch away from the wall, okay, I've got to be able to run from kind of probably my home, my big L. I've kind of got to run over to here and then charge there. And actually, yeah, that's not nothing, is it? That's a pretty big move. A normal 6-inch moving unit, which is roughly an inch away from the wall, was only going to get to around here. And then you're going to charge and you're going to have something like a 6 kind of to get to that sort of area. Okay. I mean, if they're all the way over there, then you're looking at kind of like a 7. Okay, so just something to bear in mind. Having played on this map, so we're a really basic piece of advice. Just don't forget about it. The place we were playing had these squares cut out and then laminated, and they were here. And I just like stuck a deep shot down a bunch of paladins here. I was going to shoot down there and there, and I just glossed over it to begin with until my opponent was like, you can't shoot there. So just don't forget it exists because actually, depending on how the place you're playing it has decided to make them, it is quite easy just to overlook it. Like you wouldn't overlook it on GTS, but you definitely can in real life. So there's a really basic tip for you. Don't just forget about it. What it does do is it creates a nice little staging area for you. As you can see here, if I'm deployed kind of like on the line-ish, I can advance up to around about here and I'm safe. I am not getting shot anywhere along here. Okay, so that's actually quite a nice staging area. Obviously, you're open to being countercharged, but if that's a particular part of the game, then that gives us something to think about. So yeah, my main takeaways from here are, if you can get into this sort of area, your weak spot then is being shot at by people running over to here. So you just need to have either stuff in that space, or it depends on your OC as well, right? Like sitting here is lovely, but it does mean that your opponent can probably potentially put more OC on that space. Whereas if you're kind of up here, an inch away from the wall, and it should be said that these are two separate pieces, right? So obviously by touching the terrain, you open yourself up to being shot, but it doesn't open up the other piece of terrain. So if I sit here just off of this square, then anyone who comes here to shoot can't actually see through there, because they can't see through this bit. However, if I do that, now I can be seen. So just be careful with it. And also, I would probably recommend discussing your intent with your opponent. So just to clarify, I'm not touching this one, and then your opponent knows you said that, and if models get knocked or anything, you kind of got that covered. Overall, what this impact of this should be is that you do score a little bit more primary, potentially another hold one, another 4 or 8 points in your games would be my prediction here, just because as things die and stuff, it's harder to keep knocking off. So finally, we've got a natural expansion that we can probably realistically hold reasonably well, which I think is great. But as I said, you can't now have a game plan which involves shooting your opponent off the objective from the flank. That no longer works with list building. So if you're going to run, you've got to have some fast moving guns which can land on this template to shoot in, which is obviously no mean feat. So that's mission 1. Let's take a look at mission 2. So mission 2 and 4, that's Purge the Foe and Linchpin. They are played on Crucible of Battle, so we've got diagonals. And here the big change is this 5x5 square has been positioned here and there. We've often said that on UKTC boards, the sides of the boards are very open, and so this is obviously designed to help protect that. So what does it mean? Well, first of all, when I first saw this, I wasn't entirely sold on how much of an impact it would have, and I'm still not entirely sold, and I'll explain why. Now, first of all, it does make your deployment a lot securer, because, so just for clarity, in order to be able to be shot down this line, the opponent has to be wholly on this base. Okay, so unless you're a knight, you can't just tap in and shoot down. So you've got to get an entire tank or unit on here to shoot in. What that means is turn 1, that's not happening, right? Like even a shooty knight which deploys on the line, I mean, it's a very long way away, right? So they're not towing in, they're not going to see that. So you're not worried about someone being fast moving and kind of coming across to here potentially and then shooting down into that area. That's no longer an issue. So what that does mean is that, especially if you're a melee pressure army, you could really aggressively deploy down here. And then what you can be doing is moving up to there to stage and then charge in and hit. And that just feels a lot safer. When I played this, I played into a bunch of assault centurions, and my opponent like deployed them all here really aggressively, and I was like, "Oh, that is actually quite scary." They seem very close to my objective, so I think that's quite nice. But it is more of a psychological thing, really, because in a lot of matchups you weren't going to get shot down there turn 1 anyway, and the fact of the matter is that turn 2, your opponent's still going to be able to reach this. Okay, if we just take my humble Grey Knight Rhino, best Rhino in the game, so let's say turn 1, I can kind of move it up here. Let's say I throw an advance on it. land about there, something, whatever. Turn 2, okay, quite comfortably. I'm going to be on this spot here, and I'm going to be able to shoot in. So if anyone's got any fast guns, they're going to be able to get to here, and then they're going to shoot in. Now, it is only 1 unit, so that is an improvement. On top of that, you've got your opponent might deep strike in. Well, if they're going to want to deep strike in, you've just got to screen it. And if I'm kind of trying to cut this angle down, if I'm sat here, a 9-inch deep strike screen is there, so people could land there. So I'm going to have something there. What I quite like to do is get a unit tucked up in here. That generally works quite nicely because that's quite a hard unit to shift. And then that obviously screens out kind of 9 inches that way. And then that guy here screens out 9 inches that way. It is also quite nice. Like if you have a bulkier unit holding your home field, sometimes if you couldn't like stick everything in here, you might end up with a unit like stuck there, especially if you're trying to stop the 9-inch deep strike down to your home field. You might have a unit kind of in this position, and someone could shoot you down there, which was really annoying. But that now doesn't happen. So in a weird way, you can actually hold your home field slightly better. So in terms of things to consider when you're playing, you can deploy more aggressively. You are still going to need to get units here. What I do quite like is the fact that I can just position myself here and stop my opponent from being able to get wholly within the terrain, therefore unable to shoot. So obviously this doesn't work for like an elite army, but if you have units to throw away to like move block and that sort of thing, getting a unit just around this sort of area just to stop anyone trying to fire their tanks down here is great, because if they've put their tanks here with the goal of getting there, then actually if you're sacrificing a cheap unit for a few turns to stop your opponent from landing in this area, you've actually completely taken those tanks out of the game. The then only thing that they can be doing is shooting down this line here, and obviously in theory you could be tucked there. But then conversely, you're much easier to be charged, right? So there is play and counterplay here. But yeah, I'm not entirely sold on how much of a huge impact this game has. Let me know in the comments if what you are finding works and doesn't work. In my experience, it wasn't that big a deal in the game, but I said I've only played it once because I do still think eventually, with enough effort, your opponent will just get into that space anyway, and then they will shoot down. So then you, as always, when you're playing, you've got to make your decision. What side of the board are you going? I think that's a really important one on these diagonals. Are you going to try and sweep round through the top, or are you going to try and sweep round through the bottom? And I think also being able to identify where your opponent is weakest to then go after, because actually if you go down this side, so this is what I had when I played my game, if I'm able to come down here and all of their powerful stuff is up kind of that end, then I can clear this side out, and it puts me in a stronger position, especially on something like Purge, where actually it's just points. It's because of the whole more kill more aspect. Whereas Linchpin is obviously a bit more primary orientated than Hold One. So yeah, that's kind of it. I don't really have a huge amount to add. I think obviously we just need to be really thinking about it in the deployment steps of, if I'm deploying my tanks here, I could quite easily deploy my shooting here, and I can come down this way, and if I move 10, I'm going to get past that train, I'm going to go there. So maybe there's an argument for, if you've got your shooty tanks, to deploy them this part of the board so that they can get here and be threatening to shoot down here and onto the expansion. If your opponent does that, that means you need to have an ability to deal with tanks which are about to run down this side on here and counter deploy. So yeah, when you get to looking at your opponent's army list, it's really about trying to identify if that's a cause for concern, what is going to be playing the flanks, and then trying to deploy accordingly. Or just play Grey Knights, where you can then put whatever you want wherever you want, which is what I like to do. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. Let's go to the final map. And finally, we have the search and destroy map. Now, I haven't put the hidden supplies version out, which does change positioning ever so slightly, but it's all much of a muchness. So on this particular map, where has that magic square gone? Well, it's gone here. So just outside of your deployment zone. And the goal here, I guess, is so that you can't get shot down from this angle through here, can't get shot down that angle through here, and anyone coming across to here to shoot is also going to really struggle. Okay, so it does mean it's a much more defendable map against someone who is trying to shoot you and shoot you quickly on the flanks, which obviously is some matchups. As such, I know that some close combat players are quite happy with this. My personal opinion is I'm not entirely sure on whether it will have a huge impact. I guess melee armies can answer better than that. The reason is that it doesn't actually help your staging. Okay, if you're trying to run over to this part of the board, so for example, this is what my interceptors and my grey knights often do. If I'm on the line or an inch away from the wall, I move 12 inches. Okay, so that gets me to there. I'm going to try and charge to the unit an inch away from the wall here. I'm probably going to have to get around kind of like an 8 or a 9 to get around, assuming they've kind of covered that area. If I deploy here and stage, actually, look, that's still a long way away. The only bit is if I can be around here. So if I'm here and there's nothing harmful that's going to shoot me around here, if I can turn one, move to here, stage, and then, well, if I only move 6, I'm still completely screwed. I mean, that's it's like an 8-inch charge. Obviously, if I move 12, then we're talking, and I'm in a better place there. Realistically, it doesn't help a huge amount. It's more the defensible side. So, for example, when I played on this map, I deep struck down some stuff here to shoot in here, and obviously I couldn't shoot through this part, which meant it was much easier to screen me out from kind of like here, 9 going that way, covers that kind of area. And then where are we shooting? Well, we're having to shoot across there. So you can put a lot of stuff safely there, because again, as before, which I mentioned in Terraform, you're not going to sit here and be seen through that, because they're two separate pieces of terrain. So I personally don't actually think this piece affects scores too much. I think it makes melee armies sit slightly safer from an alpha strike, but I don't think it really changes how you're going to list build. I just don't think it changes much, because all the action is still going on across here. You can't get across. Now, obviously, on a mission like Hidden Supplies, we've got an issue where there's an extra piece here, and holding your home doesn't matter. So we've got to try and pick a piece to hold, but trying to deny your opponent says you're not really getting any closer, so it doesn't really do its job. I'm not sold that this is going to really impact the meta at all. As I said, just be mindful of it. If you get an opportunity to deep strike down there, that will block you off. And also, it does mean that your screening is slightly safer, because you can kind of just have something here, and then you're not going to get shot at. So maybe like single model type thing, just sat here, like your inquisitorial priest or whatever, 40 points. He just sits there, and then no one's ever going to come in and shoot your home or your big L and that sort of thing. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't say that is going to affect things too much. So there you have it, guys. I just wanted to talk you through the 3 kind of adjustments, just in case you hadn't seen them. I think sometimes it's nice just to have someone show you it on TTS, just so you can get an idea. If you're obviously interested in a full proper analysis of the maps, that does exist in the playlist already, and that was done just before LGT in September time. And that's where I really deep dive each mission and every aspect of both the mission and the map. So that'd be far more useful. For this video, I just wanted to give a few initial thoughts on it. I've played a game on each one now, and yes, occasionally they've affected things slightly. I don't think it changes the meta too much. I don't think it affects your list building particularly. It's just something to be aware of, and don't forget about it when deep striking down 10 paladins would be my best advice. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. We have plenty of membership options. We have coaching. We do all the good stuff. Lots of information can be found on our website, on our Discord, all the usual places. So until next time, take care.